Good morning, everybody. So I have the pleasure of working at Henry Ford Maplegrove Center. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Maplegrove. Oh, some of you are. Good. We are the chemical dependency program for the Henry Ford Health System, located on Maple Road in West Bloomfield between Drake and Haggerty. Drake and Halstead. Yeah. So I'm here today to talk about, give you some general information about addiction and how to get help for people for yourself or people that you know. So raise your hand if you believe that addiction is a disease. Okay, about half of you. So addiction is a disease. It is not a choice. It's not a character weakness. It is a disease recognized by the American Medical Association in 1966. So this disease is chronic, which means once a person has it, they always have it. Even if they're clean and sober for 40 years, they're still considered to have an addiction. This disease is progressive, which means it gets worse over time. This disease is familial, which means it runs in families. It's highly genetic. It doesn't necessarily go linearly, so it might not necessarily go from great-grandfather to grandfather to father to son to grandson. It hops around. So it's almost like you never know who's going to show up in the family with blue eyes. That's very common with addiction. It hops around. And this disease is fatal. Unfortunately, people do die from it. But what I want you to know is that there's a lot of hope with this disease, because there's something like 23 million Americans in recovery, leading very happy and productive lives. So there's lots of hope. So how would you know if a person has an addiction? Well, there are some signs and symptoms. And one is a loss of control. You and I, we could probably go to a party, have a drink or two, and be done. Okay, a person who loses control is going to have 1 or 2 and then 10 and still not be done. They can't stop themselves. Another sign is cravings. Okay, we all love pizza, right? We'd love to have pizza. If we don't have it today, maybe we'll have it tomorrow or next week, we'll be okay. And then the thought leaves our mind. A person who has cravings, it's so intense that the compulsive thinking is about that pizza. It's not going to leave their mind. In this case, about alcohol or other drugs. So it doesn't leave their mind so easily. And they continue to use despite negative consequences. So bad things happen. People get arrested, they overdose, they might get into a car crash, get divorced, lose their job, and yet they continue to use. Most of us, after one of those things happen, might say, okay, I get the message, I'm done, I've had enough, right? But with addiction, people who have addictions, it continues. More and more negative consequences. So why do people use? Okay, curiosity is common. What does it feel like? Some people use because of peer pressure to fit in. We're talking usually about younger people, but you know, the age at which a person starts using regularly is the age at which they stop growing emotionally. So someone who starts at 15, who's now 35, might be emotionally 15. Even though now they're married, maybe they have children, they have a job, they might own property, but they're still functioning like a younger person. So peer pressure for them would be appropriate. What about this? To self-medicate mental health symptoms. By mental health, we're talking about things like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, eating disorders, ADD, ADHD. You've heard of those, right? So people who self-medicate often use alcohol and other drugs to self-medicate because it's a quick and easy fix. But is it effective? What do you think? It's not. It is for a very short time, and then it makes the mental health symptom worse, and then you've got other problems because of the use. And what about self-medicating physical pain? Okay, people who are in physical pain often self-medicate with alcohol and other drugs. And again, does that work? Maybe for a very short time, but again, then it wears off and the pain can worsen. So over time, when people use substances for these reasons, the abuse may develop into an addiction, which we now commonly call a substance use disorder. So young people, some of you have children or grandchildren, young people need to be taught that if they never start using, they'll never have an addiction. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But especially when it runs in families, kids need to know that. So addiction always begins with experimentation of mind-altering substances. Okay? And in our society, the gateway drugs, we call them, are tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana. Kids today aren't using tobacco like they did when we were all children. Okay, that's they've gotten the message from all of the education that this is not a safe choice. Alcohol is still common, but you know what's getting more common is marijuana. Okay, marijuana is cheap and easy to get, especially now that medical marijuana is legal in Michigan. It's accessible to our teens and young adults. Okay, although you'd be surprised how many people our ages are still using marijuana. But the marijuana today is not the same marijuana as the 60s and 70s. It is way more potent. THC is the active ingredient in marijuana, and it is something like 5 times stronger than it was in the 60s and 70s. So what does that mean? That means it's addictive. Okay, back in the day, people didn't get addicted. Now they can, and they do. 1 out of 6 teens who use regularly become addicted. Okay, so the other problem is what they're doing with this high potency THC is they're extracting it and they're making it much more powerful. And if you hear the words wax or dabbing or shatter, okay, these are very, very potent ways of using marijuana oil to get high. And it's dangerous. And people are showing up in emergency rooms with very paranoid thinking. Children, we've had a couple kids in our adolescent program have become psychotic because of use of these drugs with no previous mental health history. So it's very, very scary. So it's not no big deal like it was when we were all kids. Now it really is a big deal. And marijuana leads to other things. After using marijuana regularly for a while, it's not enough. And that's why we call it a gateway drug. It literally opens up the gateways to other drugs. So it's not safe. It is a big deal. So sometimes marijuana use or use of other drugs progresses to a use of prescription medications. So we're talking about things like Xanax, Adderall, Valium, opiates like Vicodin, oxycodone. You've heard of these, right? So what happens is people are starting to use these drugs, which is the second most common drug they're using next to marijuana. So what happens though is they believe that it's safe because they're prescribed by a doctor, okay? But it's not safe. So the pain pills in particular, okay, the opiates, the pain pills are leading to the heroin epidemic. And some of you know that we have a heroin epidemic across this country. Even in Oakland County, people are dying all the time. It's very sad. So how do people get these drugs? Well, if you have children or grandchildren who are at the age to have their wisdom teeth removed, doctors prescribe these medications. And I will tell you, my daughters had their wisdom teeth out. They were sent home with a bottle of Vicodin, 30 Vicodin. They did not need 30. 30. They did not need 30.
30.
Yes. They did not even need 3. Okay? And nobody asked, do they have any history of addiction? Okay? So you want to be really careful about that and share it with your family members. Another thing, people who are addicts will go shopping at the medicine cabinets in the homes of their family and friends. So they'll go visit grandma or grandpa who often have their pills lined up on the kitchen table or on the counter, and before you know it, some pills are missing. Or they'll go to open houses. Anybody selling your house anytime soon? So addicts will go into homes. They say they have to use the bathroom, and they clean out the cabinet. And by the time you get home at the end of the day, you have no idea who's been in your house, and your medication is gone. Okay, so real easy way to get medications. Of course, people get these medications from friends. And did you know you can order them online and have them delivered to your front door? Okay, addicts will tell you that that's where they get their medications. And of course, from doctors. Doctors often prescribe medication for a legitimate medical problem. Okay, we all sometimes have a need for this. But what often happens is they keep prescribing and prescribing and prescribing, and your medical problem is now resolved, but they keep prescribing. Or people doctor shop. You know, I'll go to this doctor and get this, go to this doctor and get this, and then go to different pharmacies, and doctors aren't on top of that. There is a program now called MAPS. I don't know if the police officer was going to talk about MAPS, then I won't. Okay, so what happens with these opiate pain medications is that after using them for a while, they're hard to get and they're expensive. Okay, some of these pills cost up to $80 per pill on the street. Who can afford that? So what's the cheaper and easier alternative? Heroin. Cheap and easy to get. $5 or $10 for a hit, it'll carry you. So that is what's helping our heroin problem to progress. So addiction can happen to any of us, absolutely any of us. Doesn't matter if you're young or old, rich or poor, educated, uneducated, black or white, it doesn't matter. Just by being human, we are all at risk of this disease. No different than we're at risk of heart disease or diabetes or cancer. Okay, so it's not just the bad people who have an addiction, you know, the junkies, the homeless. That is not true. People like you and me, any of us could become addicted. So addicts are impacted, we know that, but so are the family members. And family members are often in denial. Okay, denial meaning not being able to face reality. Okay, pretending that this isn't happening. And often it's subconscious. It's not always intentional. But the problem is this disease is progressive, meaning it gets worse over time. The sooner they get treatment, the less the disease can progress. So early intervention is the key. So someone who's in denial is not going to be intervening and getting the help that they need. So even after somebody gets treatment and they're clean and sober, relapse is common. Relapse meaning using again after a period of sobriety. And relapse does not mean you've stopped using and then you're using again. A period of sobriety has to be intentional. Okay? So someone who says, I'm going to quit, and then they do, and then they relapse, then they use again, that's a relapse. A person who just takes a break or they're in jail so they can't use, that's not a relapse. That's continued use with an interruption because of life circumstances. Okay? But not everybody relapses. It is common though. So what can you as family members and community members do to help? Well, be familiar with signs of drug use. Okay? In the back of the room, there's a resource table and there's a list of common symptoms of drug use. So in no particular order, you're looking for things like change in sleep habits, appetite, energy level and motivation, mood and personality, change in friends and activities, grades, job performance, unusual financial problems, selling items, peculiar odors or attempts to cover up the odors, slurred speech, drug paraphernalia, eye drops, deterioration in physical appearance and personal hygiene, involvement in delinquent behaviors, extreme dress, language, opinions, or behaviors, and those are only some of them. So for a complete list, you can look at the back. So what else can you do as family members besides be familiar with signs of drug use? Dispose of your medications properly. So if you were given a prescription by a doctor and now you're all better, don't leave the pill bottle in the cabinet for somebody to take. Okay? So how do you get rid of it? Well, in the old days, we told you to flush it. Okay? They're saying do not flush it anymore. It's environmentally unsafe. It gets into our water system, not good. So what do you do instead? Well, some pharmacies are giving out these Deterra bags. People put their medications in here, and in an environmentally safe way, they can be destroyed. Just this past weekend, there was a drug take-back day across Michigan. So police departments, sheriff's departments, other organizations collected the items to dispose of properly. But what you don't want to do is just leave them there, because someday you might need them, you're thinking. In the meantime, someone else is getting a hold of them, and it's feeding their addiction. If you truly need more medication, call your doctor. Okay. So in the back, there's a handout for you on what parents and grandparents can do to help. Okay? There is help available. Anybody who wants help for a substance abuse problem can get it. Okay? If you have insurance, then most insurance companies will cover it. But what if you're on Medicaid and Medicare? Okay? There's treatment available too. So if someone says, I can't afford it, that is not an accurate statement. They can get help. So, what type of help is available? Well, most people who are addicted, if they stop using, they're going to have some very, very uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms, like the worst flu you've ever felt and then some. So shakes, nausea, nervousness, sweating, physical pain, diarrhea. Okay, so an inpatient unit, such as we have at Henry Ford Maplegrove Center, they have doctors and nurses who specialize in addiction medicine who literally detox the body. They take the drugs out of the body in a safe way. People who detox themselves, and people do, if they're detoxing off of alcohol or benzodiazepines, which are the class of drugs like the sedatives, the Valium, the Xanax, those drugs, it's very dangerous to detox yourself because of seizures and high blood pressure. Now, people do it, but they can die doing it. Heroin, people can safely detox themselves at home. You would think not, right? But it is. It's very uncomfortable and very difficult, but it's not life-threatening. So a detox program is helpful. So at a detox program, they're going to use medications to help with the uncomfortable symptoms and help with the detox. So Suboxone, Subutex, have you heard of those kind of medications? Those are used. So detox typically lasts 3 to 5 days. Then a person can get inpatient treatment. So what we're talking about is they get individual help, family counseling, they go to educational lectures, they have group therapy, they can learn from speakers who come in. There's 12-step groups like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous that come in to teach the 12-step program to people who are struggling with addiction. There's also intensive outpatient programs where people can live at home, go to school, go to work, take care of their kids, whatever, but go to a program 3 hours a day, 3 days a week, and get the group therapy, the educational lectures, and the 12-step information. So that's a program that is not as intense as inpatient, but it's not the 1 hour a week counseling. We call it intensive outpatient. So those programs are available all over. They're at morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where a person, what a person's lifestyle is, they're able to fit it in. And then we have early recovery groups that's for people who have successfully completed intensive treatments and they want to maintain contact with the group to maintain the goals that they've made. That's an option as well. And individual treatment is always available, one-on-one counseling. Okay. Medication-assisted treatment. This is the up-and-coming area of addiction medicine. So there are doctors who specialize in treating patients on an outpatient basis. Are you familiar with Antabuse? Anybody? So Antabuse is a medication that they'll give an alcoholic where if they take it and they drink, they know ahead of time they will become violently ill. So they make the choice not to take it because they don't want to become violently ill. I mean, not to use alcohol. So there's other medications like that for other drugs, like heroin, like any type of opiate. So there's a Vivitrol shot, there's different types of medication, and there's also an implant that they can use. And what doctors will do is monitor someone on an outpatient basis. And typically people who do that are able to go to work, go to school, take care of their families, and function. So we call that medication-assisted treatment. We also offer substance abuse education, and I'm doing a class this weekend. If I'm not full, I need people. If you know of any teens and adults who want to come to a free program to learn about addiction for teens and adults, it's a fun, interactive way of learning. Our program is this Saturday, so all they have to do is Google Henry Ford Maplegrove Center, click on classes and events, and they'll see it. So we educate kids as well. We also have anybody who has a grandchild who is 13 to 18, we have an adolescent intensive outpatient treatment. Children get addicted quicker than adults. Okay, their brains are not fully developed and won't be until mid to late 20s. So therefore, kids who are using become addicted. And as sad as this may sound, we have had 13-year-old addicts. Okay, really sad. But we have the greatest adolescent therapist around, and she does wonders with these kids. So that's an option for family members as well. Is anybody familiar with drug prevention coalitions? Okay, there's 17 of them, soon to be 19 of them in Oakland County. So you can Google drug prevention coalitions in your area. I don't believe Farmington Hills has. You do have one. Good. And have you heard of FAN, F-A-N, Families Against Narcotics? These are people, they're addicts, They're family members, they're people in recovery who have formed a group to educate and advocate on behalf of addicts and their families, and they go into the schools and they educate teenagers about addiction. Some of these speakers are fantastic. I've had the pleasure of hearing many of them, so they're really impactful. So addiction is a family disease. It impacts everybody. If only one person in the family is using, the entire family is said to be chemically dependent because everyone's impacted, from the little kids up to the grandparents. So what do we do about that? Well, we're very fortunate in our community because Maplegrove Center is not far from here, and we have free family programs available for anyone, even if you've never had a patient at Maplegrove. You don't register, you don't pay, you just come. We have two types of programs that I want to tell you about. We have skill building classes, which are 6 different sessions that rotate, that teach family members what they need to learn about addiction. And then we have a share family support group where family members literally share their experiences with one another and help each other. These programs are open to the public, first name only. You don't register, you just show up at our front door and say, I'm here for the family programs. We have in the back on the resource table is the information that you need to know about when and where. So we also recommend that family members go to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon. So the people who have the addiction go to Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, but the family member goes to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon. These are 12-step support groups for family members to help them to deal with addiction in the family. Because I don't know if any of you have any experience with this, but it's a horrible, horrible challenge for a family member to deal with someone who's addicted. So we also run a program once a month on a Saturday. Are you concerned? If you're concerned about anybody in your life who has potentially an addiction, you can come and learn how to intervene, how to help them to get into treatment. So the disease of addiction is not curable. It's very successfully treatable, however, and there is hope. And I definitely want to leave you with that concept that there is hope. And there are many people in our community who are happy, healthy, responsible, trustworthy, honest people who once were highly addicted. So I'm using these adjectives to describe addicts. Okay, it's pretty hopeful. So I want to talk to you about what you can do as family members, as parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. What can you do to help? So on the back table is a handout of a bunch of ideas. And I want to just, do I have time, Marcia, to run through them real quickly? Sure. Okay, don't be an enabler. An enabler is someone who's helping the addiction to continue, even though that's the last thing on earth they want to do. So learn about enabling. If you have a family history of addiction, it is doing nobody a favor by keeping that private, okay, keeping it a secret, because young people need to know that they're genetically at risk just by being born into your family. No different than me. I was born into a family with high risk of heart disease, and I grew up knowing that, so I could learn to take care of myself. It's important for them to know. You want to share with your family members that this is not the same marijuana from back in the day, and it causes severe mental health problems nowadays. You want to, if you suspect that someone in your family has an addiction, you want to lock up everything. Okay, your car keys, your jewelry, your money, credit cards, checkbook, everything, because young people will steal from their grandparents. Okay, and grandparents often say, no, they love me too much. They would never do that. The addiction is stronger than the love. The addiction is stronger than anything. You've heard of parents selling their babies for crack? If they'll do that, they'll do anything, including steal from their grandparents. So you want to lock it up. Make it clear to your family members that you are available to talk privately, and you don't want to promise ever to not share information. So if your grandchild comes to you and says, don't tell my parents, but this is what I'm doing, you don't want to agree to that. So don't make any promises. Denial is common in a family, very, very common. So you be the one who's not in denial. Okay, you be the one to get the person help. At 12-step meetings, oftentimes a family member or an addict will give an open talk. They're fascinating. Okay, what happens is someone will get up and they'll tell their story, how the problem began, how it got worse, and then how they found recovery and how great life is now. Wonderful stories, always inspiring and uplifting, and that's open to the public as well. So going to those meetings will give people hope. If you suspect someone's using, you don't ever want to offer them anything like money. You don't want to pay their bills. You don't want them to loan them your car, okay, because you're enabling the addiction to continue. But you could agree to transport them to meetings or transport them to treatment if that's what they are willing to do. If you suspect somebody has an issue, you might want to think about hosting alcohol-free parties at your house, okay? And maybe even do that even if no one has a problem, because you're giving teens and young adults the information that alcohol is not necessary to have fun. You also don't want to allow grandchildren to taste your alcoholic beverage. Okay? You're giving them a mixed message. You can't drink until you're 21, but here, have a sip. Okay? You're giving them a mixed message. You want to role model healthy coping skills and ways to relax and have fun without alcohol. Truly, this generation of kids, many of them are having trouble coping. Okay? They need to learn coping skills. They're now teaching meditation and yoga in schools. Did you know that? I know that West Bloomfield High School has a thriving yoga program after school because kids don't have these skills. You want to share stories with them about good and bad choices you've made in your life. Because if they know that you've had some challenges, you've had some issues, they're more likely to come to you to talk about their issues. If a teen is uncomfortable and you're a family member, you might want to say, if you need a ride home because you're in an uncomfortable position, call me. I will pick you up. Okay, they might be afraid to call their parents, or they might be afraid to call one parent, but if you say, I will get you out of there, no questions asked, call me, they're less likely to get in a car with a using driver. Role play situations, okay? What would you do if? How would you handle this situation? How would you handle that? Okay, helping them to solve problems before they happen so that when they're under stress, they have the answer up here. It's a really great tool. And use teachable moments. You know, if things happen, if you're watching TV together and the news is on and there's a story about a drunk driver who killed somebody, having that conversation. You know, if you see something about marijuana on TV, having the conversation. And we always want to encourage young people to say no if they're uncomfortable, even if that means to us adults. Because a child who can say no is not going to be talked into doing anything that they feel they shouldn't do. So giving them permission to say no. And lastly, we want to hold our children and grandchildren accountable for their behavior. Okay? You don't want to let them off the hook. Okay? If they borrow money from you, they're paying it back. If they borrow your car, they're replacing the gas. Okay? Because this holds them accountable and teaches them responsibility. And in my experience as a substance abuse counselor since 1993, I can tell you that many addicts have had their families take care of everything for them and they have no sense of responsibility. So we want our kids to grow up having a sense of responsibility. So on that note, I will end and I will let our police officer speak.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is JKing. I'm a commander with the Farmington Hills Police Department. I'm here with Lieutenant John Haupt, and we're going to do a presentation. We're going to do two things. We're going to give a brief presentation with some information. We're also going to let you guys know about Operation Medicine Cabinet and Drug Take Back that was referenced in the earlier presentation. I'm going to start by giving you guys some information, with some trends and what's going on out there in our community, Farmington Hills. Okay. A brief overview of a big situation right now is our opioid and heroin situation in Farmington Hills. Basically, opioids are a substance that act on the receptors in the brain and the nervous system, and they're primarily used for pain relief. The brain has, when these opioids get into those receptors, it overwhelms the receptors and it can cause difficulty breathing, slow breathing, and cause death. Okay, these effects can last typically 2 hours to anywhere up to 32 hours. Okay, signs of overdose in what we're experiencing: no breathing or shallow breathing, limp, turning pale. Victims make gurgling or snarling noises, and basically this heroin situation is spawned from the pill situation. Okay, these prescription pills that are being prescribed on an increased basis. Over the last 3 years, there's information on the DEA website that the prescription pills in Michigan specifically have been on the increase. I believe the numbers were high 200 or low 200,000s, and in the last 3 years it's grown about 15,000 prescriptions annually. Okay? In Farmington Hills, with our situation, we've had approximately 70 overdoses in 2016. Okay? It's all races, all ethnicities, all sexes. It doesn't matter. This is a problem. What the Farmington Hills Police Department and the Farmington Hills Fire Department has done to kind of combat this is we've started deploying our Narcan kits. If anybody's not familiar with this, I'll explain it real quick. This is our kit to counteract an opioid overdose, a heroin overdose. And in 2016, our police department saved 9 lives. Okay, our fire department, they saved 25 lives. And they were deployed over 60 times by the fire department alone. Okay, that's how successful these are, and that's what our departments are doing to kind of combat that. Also, what Michigan did to combat this problem is they changed law. Previously, in previous years, if someone was overdosing and they were in medical distress, people were hesitant to call the police because they were afraid of getting charged with a crime for the possession or having the paraphernalia on them. Now what Michigan law has enacted is an exemption from that. It's basically an emergency exception, where if you're overdosing or someone you're with is overdosing and you have that, or they have that narcotic or that paraphernalia on them, they're exempt from prosecution to get that medical help. So those are some of the things that Michigan and Farmington Hills Police Department and Fire Departments are doing to combat this problem we have. Spawning off that problem is the fentanyl and carfentanil issues. Is anybody familiar with carfentanil or fentanyl? Okay. Fentanyl is roughly 150 times more potent than morphine, and carfentanil is 1,000 times more potent than morphine. And what drug dealers are doing is they're cutting their product. Cutting their product is not a new situation. They magnify the product to create more product, to sell more product, to make more money. They also try to increase the effect of their product, this heroin. That is not a new trend either. Back in the 70s, 80s, they used to soak marijuana with formaldehyde. And they used to intensify the high of the marijuana. Now what they're doing is they're intensifying the high of heroin with this fentanyl and carfentanil. The problem is it's deadly. As few as 8 grains of this carfentanil can kill a person. Okay? To give you an idea, in Michigan about heroin use in teenagers, we're going to focus on that for just a real bit quick. In 2008, they did a study, and throughout Michigan, approximately 0.5% of high school students tried or experimented with heroin. That was 2008, 0.5%. 2016, that rose to over 6%, and that's high school students. Nationally, 46 individuals overdose and die due to heroin daily. 46.
That was nationally?
I'm sorry?
That was nationally?
Nationally. Some trends going on in Farmington Hills, some trends in Farmington Hills. We're seeing heroin, we're seeing other kinds of drugs, and we're taking aggressive action to combat those. But we're going to focus specifically on prescription pills right now, and some of the things that we've seen in our teenagers, and something that we can do to combat that in this room. In 2008, I was in a school liaison officer, and we had started seeing the signs of heroin getting into the high schools and some of the teenage populations. What we also saw is prescription abuse. And what that was kids were taking prescription pills from where? Mom, dad, other family members, grandma, grandpa. What we did was we saw kids combining pills to get that euphoric effect or to get some other kind of high. And what we saw was them mixing things like muscle relaxers and painkillers. A student in a local high school did so, combined those two pills, took that pill, and ended up falling off of a cement staircase inside of one of the local high schools and being significantly injured. What they're doing is they're being educated where? The internet. They're getting the internet, it's very accessible. They get these ideas or these concoctions from the internet, and then they need, what's the other factor they need? They need the pills. Where are they getting the pills? They're not going to the street. They don't need to go to the street. They're going to the medicine cabinets, the cabinets, grandma and grandpa's house, friend's house, and I'll get into some stories about that. Then they're mixing those pills and they're having deadly effects. Another trend that teenagers are doing is they're calling pick parties. Has anybody ever heard that, pick parties? Your entrance into these parties is prescription pills. You go to a house, there's a pill, there's a party, a group of friends, they have a bowl, everybody puts in their quantity of pills, and they're getting those pills where? Again, the medicine cabinets, friend's house, parents, grandparents. And then at a certain time, they all have to reach in and blindly take a pill and ingest that pill. It could be a muscle relaxer, it could be an aspirin, it could be something even deadlier, okay? So those are some of the trends that our teenagers, our youth are into, okay? Also, it's not only pills, prescription pills out of the medicine cabinet. What they're doing is they will take a cough medicine, over-the-counter cough medicines, and they'll mix it with Sprite. And they'll call it street names like Purple Drink, something like that. And they'll take this DMX, this chemical in those cough medicines, and they'll ingest it. They'll even purge it. They'll throw it back up. It'll make them sick. They'll throw it back up. But that chemical is already in their body. And they're getting this information, again, where? The internet. Their friends are getting it from the internet. So those are just some of the, a little bit of trends that we have going on out there. And going back to some of the prescription pills that the earlier speaker spoke of, is she hit on wisdom teeth. Opioid medications getting prescribed for wisdom teeth. What some studies have revealed recently is two of the biggest ways our teenagers, our young adults are getting hooked on these opioid medications are wisdom teeth and sports injuries. Because what do our teenage boys and girls out there doing? Playing sports. They're getting hurt. We take them to the doctor. What do? Stop the pain. Okay? Those are two of the ways that they're getting out there. And to kind of wrap it up, because we're crunched for time, two things. What the Farmington Hills Police Department does for its community is we have Operation Medicine Cabinet. And that is a 24/7 operation. You can walk into the Farmington Hills Police Department anytime, any day, Christmas, whatever, you name it, and you can turn in your unused prescription drugs. And what you do is you can identify yourself. You don't have to identify yourself. You turn them in, we seal them, and we dispose of them safely. Okay? We get them out of your house, off the street. Okay? The previous speaker also talked about the DEA drug take back. We did that Saturday. In 4 hours, our police department took back 156 pounds of prescription pills in a 4-hour period. One study, we've taken back recently over 2,086 prescription packages last year. So our citizens brought in packages of 2,086 pills, and that's not just one prescription. Those are 11 by 13 manila envelope full of pills. 2,086. Okay, they could have had 100 pills. They could have had. I've had them turned in. It had thousands of pills in there because people have had medical situations where they had been prescribed significant amounts of pills for pain and treatment and everything, and they've accumulated over time. And when that person has passed, their family members have brought in boxes of pills that are out there. Okay, so those are some of the two things that the Farmington Hills Police Department and Farmington Hills Fire Department are doing for the community. One thing I want to tell you guys, what you guys can do, is you guys can do 3 things. You can secure your medications. We have gun safety. We give away gun locks. We can use those gun locks to secure your medications. Everybody talks about the pill bottles. Well, what are the pill bottles made to defeat? Who cannot get into a pill bottle? Young kids. We put locks on cabinets. We put locks on doors. We don't want the kids to get into the scrubbing bubbles under the sink and everything, right? Well, who are we talking about getting into these pills? The 4-year-olds? The teenagers? Will a pill bottle defeat a teenager? No. So you got to lock them up. You can also track them. You need to know what's going on with your pills. How many people walk up, uncap it, take one, cap it, put it away? You don't know if there's 15 in there. You don't know if there's 10 in there. You don't know if your young teenager or grandchild got 5 of them out of there, got 10 of them out of there. Some of those pills are pretty significant. 90-day supplies, some of those large pill bottles, they can get a significant amount of those pills out and they can do some damage, okay? Dispose, the third thing, dispose. Bring it to us. Let us help you. We will get rid of it for you. You do not even need to, you need to walk into the front desk, drop it and say, thank you very much. That's all you need to do. And I want to give another story real quick to drive that home. Everyone thinks they're doing good for their house. You're going to secure your medications. You're going to secure your prescriptions, right? You're going to make it safe in your house. What about others' homes? There was a situation where a young person committed suicide by taking prescription pills. That person did not get prescription pills from their parent. They did not get prescription pills from their grandparents. They didn't get it from family. Anybody want to take a guess where they got it from? This young woman was babysitting. And she got it from where she babysat. And it was enough to cause death. So that's how serious, and it's a community issue. We all need to do it. If I have young kids, my kids' friends come over, it's in a lockbox. That's where it is. Yeah, I know my 7-year-old can't get it. I know my 13-year-old can't get it. I know my 16-year-old can't get it. I also know their friends can't get it. So that's some of the things that we need to think about, and I apologize for being brief. I had a longer presentation, but I wanted to open it up for a couple questions if we have time. And if anybody has questions, I'll be more than happy to try to answer them to the best of my ability. Yes, ma'am?
How much do those kits cost?
The Narcan kits. Well, we get them through a federal grant through the Oakland County Health Department, okay? But these can't be obtained. These are only for heroin overdoses, overdoses. They won't work on various other drugs. You can't get these without a prescription, but in Michigan, you can go and lobby your doctor if you have an identified family issue and get one of these kits for safety. But in Michigan, there's about 14 states that you can buy these over the counter. Okay, but Michigan's not one of them as of now. Okay, but you can get a prescription for them. It is obtainable.
Is it an astronomical amount? I heard $6,000.
No. The most expensive kit, I want to say, our fire department. Again, there are certain governmental access to bulk through these that they get these for about $14, $15. Our kits are on the lower end. There are EpiPen that will talk to you. Those are about $600, $700, and they talk to you and they say inject into the thigh, just like an EpiPen for a bee sting or something like that. So they're out there, but you got to get a prescription. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
When bringing medication to the police department, in a prescription drug bottle, in a baggie, how do we turn it over to you?
You simply walk in and you present it to us. We'll collect it. The prescription bottles we don't keep. You can have those. There's some personal information on there. You may want to go and destroy yourself. We don't do that. We destroy the pills. And we will not take back liquids or aerosols, because what we do is we amass this great quantity of pills. These, hundreds of pounds of pills, and they're incinerated. Okay, and they're incinerated. So if you have an aerosol or something in there, it could be explosive.
What about the containers, like she mentioned?
Do you have a place that comes and picks it up and disposes it and?
No,
scraps them?
no, ma'am. That's either garbage or recycle. That's basically your discretion what you want to do with it. The pills we will take care of. But if you want to recycle the pill bottles, if you want to take your prescriptions, I recommend in my house we take the prescription labels off because it has that. But that's your responsibility. We won't disassemble all that. Anything else? Yes.
So the carfentanil and the fentanyl have to be fairly cheap if they're going to use it to lace heroin with.
Yes, they manufacture it. These drug cartels are manufacturing it, and it is cheaper to manufacture. The problem is it's not tested. It's not pure. It's not tested for purification. It's not tested for appropriateness. We had situations in Farmington Hills where individuals went and purchased heroin. They went to their nice guy drug dealer, right, and they bought heroin. So on the way back, our officers intervened. They found it, and what they found was that this was a package of pure carfentanil. If that individual would have ingested even portions of that, he would have died immediately. It was pure carfentanil. That's the problem. Drug dealers, the FDA, they weigh out medications, they make sure, and when doctors prescribe it, they say, you're a 150-pound person, this is how many milligrams or whatever dose you should take. Your bad person drug dealer is not doing that. They're dumping whatever they have to make money, because that's what they do. They don't get a Better Business Bureau rating, they don't get any kind of a customer satisfaction. They want to make money, so they dump those things in there. And let's be honest, what carfentanil was originally made for, I believe, was like elephant tranquilizer. That's what it was made to do. I'm not that big as an elephant, and you're going to be putting something in you, and it's going to stop your heart, it's going to kill your nervous system, it's going to kill you. And even in the Farmington Hills Police Department, we've altered our procedures for handling it. It is so deadly. It can be absorbed through the skin. There were officers in Arizona where it was a little bit more prevalent that have been significantly injured and put off the job because of handling this. And what it is what we do now is we seal it up. It is so dangerous that we seal it up immediately when we find it on the street. So that's how serious it is. Go ahead.
Finding on the street, like what kind of paraphernalia are you guys, me as a parent, just like what should I be looking for?
Anything.
Essentially?
I hate to say it, ma'am, anything. Because now what they do is these drug dealers are inventive. Okay? What they do now is they press it into a pill that looks like a Vicodin. They'll press heroin into a pill that'll look like Vicodin. So then somebody accidentally thinks, oh, Vicodin. Even if they're innocently finding it, they shouldn't be taking anything that's not theirs. But if they take that, they could be ingesting heroin or fentanyl or carfentanil.
So my suggestion to you would be Google drug paraphernalia, and there will be a lot of articles. They'll show pictures. Some of the sites show pictures, so you'll know what you're looking for.
There's needles. You can ingest it, inhale it. You can take it in pill form. There's pretty much anything.
On TV, they said that go to Windsor and get things there and get it less expensive than the United States. Is that still going on?
Stuff. What exactly? Oh, I don't know if you have to necessarily go over the border. You can go in Michigan and get the drugs. Yeah.
I'm saying
Yep.
more than it's ever been.
Drugs are cheaper in certain areas, and like I said, we export a lot of pills, prescription pills, down to Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, those areas, because the pills from Michigan may go for $10, they'll go for $30 or $40 down in Kentucky.
Did you explain
Yes.
MAPS? I don't know if you.
Michigan, it's a prescription tracking database that we have access to, that your doctors also put your prescriptions into, that we can say, okay, say we pull you over on the street and you have this plastic Ziploc baggie of 1,000 pills. Probably shouldn't have that, right? But in rare instances, we can check that database and you could have a legitimate prescription for it. Also, it cross-references some, for us on the law enforcement side, investigative-wise, we can make sure we're not kind of chasing a criminal that's legitimate in what they're doing with the doctors and things like that. It's also a lot of ways we can track doctors who are prescribing pills. We do infrequently, we find doctors that, well, this is the same doctor we had on this guy. This is the same doctor we had on this guy. We can track that.
Is that reported to?
Usually our drug enforcement agency task force officers handle that, and they have units inside the DEA that handle prescription drug investigations.
And don't they also track if I'm going to a pharmacy over here and a pharmacy over here, and they're going to figure out that I'm...
You called it pharmacy shopping or doctor shopping, things like that. It can also track that, yes. Anything else? I'm ready. All right. Thank you guys very much for your time.